Okay, welcome everyone. I'm librarian Mike Aiken. Just a heads up, the presentation is being recorded. It'll be available in a couple weeks on our Owens Talks at the library page, which I'll direct you to after the presentation. At the same time, I'll show you some library guides to supplement the information presented today. So, under what conditions and how much of copyrighted work can legally be used for instruction or student projects? Doctrine of Fair Use in U.S. copyright law addresses these questions. Now, fair use centers around 4 guidelines, but there are, as you'd expect, some gray areas. Our presenters will explain and give examples of the ins and outs of fair use. So I want to welcome today Denise Rothbergen and Robert Tippert of the School of Liberal Arts. They presented before on fair use at an Ohio Music Education Association conference and a faculty symposium. Denise is an internship manager in the School of Liberal Arts. In addition, she teaches music business classes. She's a harpist and has published dozens of compositions, arrangements, and instructional books for the harp. She plays in a duo called Tapestry with her acoustic guitarist husband Michael. Rob teaches audio recording and music technology courses. Outside of teaching, he is an active freelance drummer in the Cleveland area. Please feel free to ask questions at any time via chat or verbally. I'll keep an eye on the chat area for questions. Those of you who'd like to ask verbally, please use the hand raise icon at the bottom of the screen before speaking. Finally, if you don't plan to ask verbally or before you do, please mute your microphone. And let me get rid of this. Oops. And turn it over to Denise and Rob.
Thank you so much for having us. I know Rob's going to bring up our PowerPoint, but I was just going to sidebar to say, don't worry about like waiting to the end or anything to ask questions. When they come up, ask them because it'll be, you know, in the moment, and that's fine with us. Hey, Rob, now I see you.
Yeah, so I guess I got confused. I didn't realize I was going to transmit the PowerPoint. So let me.
Yeah, it should be in the share content file for you. Okay. Share files.
Well, there you go.
I can probably find my copy if, I guess I thought that you were doing it, so I didn't bring mine up.
No, like every application, there's 100 ways to do different things. And
there are. That's certainly true.
Yet another one of them.
It is in there, isn't it, Rob?
It's in there.
Okay.
I'm clicking, and then I'm going to hit share now and see what happens. Yeah, when I was teaching during the school year, I'd just have a separate screen that had the display.
There we go.
Look. Oh, nice. So yeah, as Mike explained, and Mike, thanks again for having us to talk on this topic, although Denise is going to really start us off here in 2 seconds with a statement we like to add at the beginning of any kind of conversation like this, but we're happy to be here and share what we found out based on a couple of different reasons why we started this investigative kind of thing to be able to talk about copyright. In our music recording classes, we have a project that they're supposed to download a public domain black and white cartoon or video and remove all the audio and add lip-synced audio or background music or sound effects. And that project is what kind of started this whole discussion of, well, what are we actually allowed to do with that? But before we go any further, Denise, could you just let everybody know something?
Okay, so what I always say, and when I teach music business too, we spend about 6 weeks on intellectual property, and copyright is a type of intellectual property. But the first thing I always say, and I probably repeat it once a week, is we are not lawyers and we don't play lawyers on TV. So this is not to be presumed as, how do you say it, Rob, as being legal advice, just tips based on things we've learned.
Yeah, so we've read a lot of web pages and stuff like that, and a bunch of ridiculous amount of documents.
Yeah, so, and books and all. Go on. Go ahead.
To get us started, what we want to do is make sure that everybody understands that certain works, their copyright does expire, and whatever happens to be in the public domain is free for you to do whatever you would like to do with. when you're making something, you could produce something today and decide to put it in public domain and just say, hey, this is free for anybody to do anything they want with it. Or if you copyright something, there's a certain amount of time that you have access to those rights, and then automatically those rights expire. They can be renewed. Otherwise, the work, whatever it happens to be, will go into public domain. So here's just a little bit of information about that. Anything prior to January 1st, 1926 is automatically in public domain. So, any Sousa work, I'm speaking, I should say, we're going to be talking about arts and recording and music and published music and things like that as reference material, but this does apply to books and poems and audio recordings and video recordings and things like that as we
Photographs as
yes,
well.
photographs.
Yeah.
Yep. Good, thank you. So specific works 70 years after the death of the author go into public domain. If a work is corporate authorship, 95 years from the publication or 120 years from creation, whichever expires first. That seems like a long time, 95 years or 120 years. And especially because it's corporate, we can tell you, although we don't have a slide on it, that's directly related to what they affectionately called the Sonny Bono Act. But really what it did is provide a way for a group or a corporation to continue the copyright over a specific mouse cartoon. And that couldn't be put in public domain just yet because they were still making plenty of money on it. So I already mentioned too, the author can publish the work immediately into public domain. And on this slide, facts and government published work is public domain. So yeah, the phone book or our Constitution, or if lawyers were doing an investigation and you wanted to review the Mueller report, that is public domain. It's not owned by the government per se, it's owned by the people. So it's available.
Rob, a little sidebar that is important to know about copyright in general before we even get to fair use is to be aware of what the Constitution actually says. And I'm actually going to read this. I kind of have it memorized, but just to make sure. Copyright copyright is to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times, and there's where those terms came in on that last slide, to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So copyright is not just something somebody made up. It's in the Constitution, and those terms, oh, thanks for putting the slide back up. Those terms of copyright are determined by Congress. And before that act that Rob talked about, that act added 20 years because the corporate authorship used to be 75. But Mickey Mouse, I said it out loud, was about to go into public domain, and the building of lawyers got upset and they got it extended. So 2023 is the next year for Mickey Mouse. So it's going to be, the next few years are going to be really interesting to see what happens. Little sidebar, kind of a passion of mine, but just to give you a little more information. Mr. Thomas just wrote weather forecast by the U.S. Weather Service. There you go. That's a public domain. Thanks, Rob.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Denise. Good. So although there's far more history to copyright and copyright law in the United States, what we're talking about today is fair use, and fair use was pretty much implemented, although the concept of it was 100 years before this, 1976. The idea behind it had already been thought out. It just hadn't become official until the Copyright Act of 1976, and those were updates from previous versions of the copyright laws. So basically provide a guideline for use of copyrighted material without paying for or obtaining a license to use the work. We like to say that fair use is not a right, but a legally defensible position. And it's true. If you just check off a box and say, well, what I'm doing with my class, it falls under this thing, so I'm good to go. No, not necessarily. If somebody wants to come after you and say, "Hey, you're not allowed to do that," you can approach a judge and say, "Here's why we picked that, and here's why, you know, why we feel that it's fair use." And then ultimately, it's on that day, at that time, whoever's wearing the robe in behind the judge's bench is going to make that decision whether it's actually fair use or not. So, and today we're going to discuss those 4 factors. So we'll just jump right into it, the first factor. So factor 1 is purpose and character of the work. If you were going to use something for commercial purposes, whether it's online or you're producing a movie or something like that and you want to use something, you have to obtain the rights. You need written permission to use that in a commercial setting. If you're doing something in a non-commercial use and no money's going to trade hands and nobody's going to get rich off of this idea, chances are good it's not going to be as much of an issue. And by that I mean the courts might see it as, hey, you weren't trying to make money, you were trying to do something for education purposes, or create a different kind of an idea out of a story, or create a new piece of art out of several old pieces of art or something like that. And would look at it that way. If you're trying to make money on it and sell this big collection of songs for KTEL or something like that, you need to get all of those rights cleared before you try to do anything like that. When we're talking about our educational institutions, for the most part, the ideas we come up with, as long as they are going to be socially valuable, we stand a better chance in front of a judge, to put it that way. And I put this link in here. If you want to now or later come back to this slide and copy that link and go watch this. It's on YouTube. Somebody, I can't remember exactly who put this together, but they took clips of Buffy the Vampire Slayer episodes and clips of the Twilight series movies. And they created a completely different, a short video that shows Edward as a stalker and Buffy trying to convey the whole, don't stalk me, don't show up at my window at night, I'm going to take you out, this isn't cool, you're not being good. And you know, it's really more about women's rights and the right to feel secure and not have people kind of freaking you out all the time, being around every corner. So they use snippets of both of those, and at the very end of that video, it's a great video, and at the end of the video, it even says that this falls under fair use because this is not used to make money. It's using 2 different videos to create a brand new thing that wasn't either of those 2 original concepts. So.
And a little sidebar to remember, and this comes into play more when it comes to music, which is what Rob and I do, of course, is a lot of people have the misconception that, well, I'm not making any money at it, so it must be fair. That's not automatically fair. So and although your comments are legitimate, I'm not challenging what you said, of course, but just make sure that you don't just pick that and say, well, I'm not making any money, so it's fair, because that's not necessarily true.
Correct.
So it's just a
Correct.
little sidebar.
There's always, but what about that?
They're always. And we're always
Everything.
coming up with examples, aren't we? And we go, wonder what that one means. Yeah.
Okay. So factor number 2, nature of the copyrighted work. While this might be considered generally the least important in the decision process, according to the courts, there is that one caveat, and this applies to if I'm teaching a music composition or Denise is teaching some sort of private lessons or anything where you're dealing with students creating something. If I was, let's change that. Let's say if I was recording a band and I wanted to demonstrate to the class what I did to record that band, I need to be extremely careful if the band didn't already publish that recording session. I don't have the right to show or publicly display or do much of anything with it. Even if it's in the classroom, I can't show somebody something that a band's doing before they've released it, unless, of course, I've got permission from the band directly. or the copyright owner directly. So that's that one situation where if it's unpublished, you really don't want to do much with it without getting actual, permission from the author.
And the key to remember, and it's here on the slide, but if you want to even make it shorter, when you say, I like that question too, what does published mean? All you need to know is it means it's been made available to the public. So your great example of that band that had a recording done, but it's only saved in somebody's computer, that has not been available to the public. So it has not been published. Does that make sense, I hope?
Yeah, that's spot on. Exactly the case. And the reason why it's good to understand what published really means is a little bit later on we'll talk more about it, but your Netflix subscription or your Hulu subscription or your ESPN, all sports subscription, it says in the details there that you're not allowed to display or publish any of their content without written express consent, right? And so we need to really understand what do we mean when we say published. All right. So factor 3, amount and substantiality of portion. And this is one of those things where I would also go and consult the librarians and just make sure that what you're thinking about doing is going to be legal. And if you need to digitize something that's in an analog state, like an old vinyl record or something like that, double check with the library. They're the ones that really know all of this stuff inside and out and can tell you if a certain amount of a book or a certain amount of a poem and all of that are going to generate something that would be considered an infringement. But the greater amount that you're thinking about using is probably not going to be fair use. Small excerpts of things is what would be more considered more acceptable. And you're going to see on the next slide here, I copied out some amounts and percentages to show you, according to another author that wrote on copyright law, what's technically allowed. And again, it's a gray area because how much you'll see on the slide. But the heart of the work and how significant is what you're taking. Like if I wanted to sample a very small piece of a popular song, and it sounds like this, boom boom ch, boom boom ch, boom boom ch. That might not seem like that much, but if that's all I start with, everybody's going to think of a very specific song, and that little tiny thing would be copyrighted, and I would need to be very cautious if I start a song like that and don't do much else with it. People are going to recognize that, and all of a sudden that's probably, that's copyrighted, and I can't really just run with that. I need to go further with it and change some things up. So,
well, and that's a great example. Your heart of the work button there, the third one is, and you made an example, and you and I were talking the other day about the 2 notes used in Law and Order. And if somebody heard that, anybody that doesn't live on a desert island, they know exactly what it is. And so even though we should measure how long that is sometime, I'd be curious. But even if that is less than a second, everybody knows what that is. And so that's going to be a no because it is the work and it's the heart of the work. So that's just another example that might be helpful.
Yep. Yeah, as far as presidential campaigns, speeches, quotes, things like that, those are all going to be in public domain anyhow. So you can kind of do what you want with that, with caution. I know you can get in a lot of trouble if you start rearranging words and making it look like something was that wasn't and things like that. So you just want to be aware of that. And the last bullet point, sound bites and things like that. So certain things like little jingles that represent a brand that, the McDonald's little theme notes, the little melody that represents McDonald's. You need to be very cautious if you use that in that specific order, those notes, because it's going to be easily recognizable. So let's take a look at, this is according to Rebecca Butler. from her book, Copyright of Librarians, for Librarians and Professionals, just amounts and uses. And I know it's written in here, but in some of the other reading that we did for this presentation, it's pointed out that it wasn't authors and librarians who created these amounts. It was publishers working with Congress that came up with what they would accept as, or would deem acceptable amounts of types of things that can be copied or photocopied for in-classroom use, or put on the internet through Blackboard or something like that. So you can see 10% or 3 minutes of motion media or video. That's not very long if you need to critique an entire scene. Depending on the scene itself, it might be longer than that, even if it's more than 10%. Text, a word count. I don't know if they literally would sit and count the number of words, but these are these recommendations, again, put up by the publishers, not necessarily by the people that make the art or the people that would use the art. It's the people that get paid to protect the copyrights that were making these rules. So, grain of salt, but I mean, here's a starting point. Let's put it that way. And then again, I defer back to the library. Go consult one of the librarians and say, based on this much, am I still okay? That's probably the safest thing you can do, because if a consensus says no, that seems like too much, then you need to trim back a little bit.
And also, Rob, I want to say, make sure that you're realizing this particular page is very interesting, because we get those comments from students who say, well, you're allowed to use up to this much. This is for educational multimedia. This is not for any other purpose. So we want to be very clear what this slide is telling us. And you have it at the top. I'm just,
Oh, yeah.
re-mentioning that, because
It's
this
important.
is not something you can do if you're, making your own movie and, no. This is just for this particular purpose. But by the way, does the library have that book?
Oh boy, I don't know if I asked
I
that.
believe we do.
I don't. Oh, good. Because it sounds really interesting. I need to look at that book. I haven't seen that one before.
Yeah. It's good, and in that book they have different graphs and different tables that you can kind of refer to that show you how much of this, how much of that, and then some flow charts. If this is something copyrighted for use online, or is this in public domain, and then some flow charts that you can just kind of follow along and see if what you're thinking about using in your classroom fits the criteria.
Pardon the interruption, Rookie. I was 99.9% sure we had it just checked, and we absolutely 100% have it. So.
Oh, good. Thank you
Great.
for letting us know that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hey, Rob, let's have a little pause and see if anybody is holding on to a question for us. I don't want the folks to feel like they can't ask. Rob Thomas asked a question in the chat, and I answered it. If I compose and produce a music bed and add it to a video I produce, post the video with the music on YouTube, does that make the music published? And I wrote back and said, yes, if you made it available to the public by putting it on YouTube, so yes, it is considered published. So that was one question that did come in.
So when we say that something needs to be in tangible form to be copyrighted, would we say a digital production like that is a tangible form, even though it's not on a cassette tape to pick up or written on?
Yeah, it's interesting, and we don't want to spend too much time with this, but if I, and I'm not a physical artist, but if I went down to Shelby's gallery downstairs and I drew a picture of her while she's sitting there working at her computer, my drawing is copywritten as soon as it's tangible. I put dates on everything I do in case I ever need to go back. Tangible also means an audio recording. It means a video recording. It means a saved computer file. Who else can think of other things that are tangible? Audio, video, computer file, handwritten. Those would be
Photograph.
the main tangibles. Photograph is yes, thank you. That's also a good one. Thank you. Those are all copywritten. And tangible means something you can touch or almost touch. One good example to tell you of something that isn't copywritten is the jazz saxophone player that plays an improvisation on Scrabble from the Apple at a gig. He doesn't own that unless it's been videotaped or audio taped. It's gone. It's out in the air and it's gone. You don't own it unless it's tangible, and it's not tangible in that condition, if that makes sense. So it's interesting one that you brought up, Rob. I'm glad you brought that subject up.
Of course, that always takes you to another side concept that if you're at the performance, that is the only performance of it. But if you're at the performance and you have your cell phone and you start recording something, you're changing the game. You're changing it completely.
I know, and let's not talk about that.
Yeah. As musicians, we frown upon that. As
we frown, yes.
We love that. So the trick, you get caught. Let's see if I can advance here. All right, so our fourth factor, effect on market value. If what you're doing is going to impact in a negative way what somebody could have potentially earned, or on the opposite side, if what you're doing significantly improves the amount of capital that you could be made off of something, it could still you could still be in trouble until you pay up. There's the whole idea that you can use something in any way, shape, or form, and it's not necessarily legal, but if you publish something with the intent to make money, as soon as you start making money, they're going to come after you. And while that's not necessarily the law, that's probably when they'll start coming after you. They may not come after you if you do a little something on YouTube, but if you do a little something and then all of a sudden you're getting millions of clicks and support and followers and advertising money, that's when they're going to they're going to come after you. Anyhow, how a defendant's use will affect a copyright owner, that's kind of what I just explained, but actual harm to current and potential uses. Yeah, I don't have a great example of that. I have an example similar to that idea, which goes back to 1917, Herbert versus Shanley Company. Shanley Company was a restaurant, and Herbert was a composer, and he had written something. It was in the mechanical form of a piano roll, and the piano roll was in a player piano in the restaurant, playing his music. And at that time, he wasn't protected by ASCAP or BMI because those things didn't exist. So he wasn't getting a royalty payment for his music being played and used in the restaurant to entertain the diners. And he took issue with that, and that instance was part of the creation of the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, ASCAP. So that's an instance where he recognized that, number one, that was his music being used without his consent. Number two, it was a player piano, not a live professional musician. So that was slightly different too. And he felt that he should be compensated for the use of what he composed to provide entertainment. So it's an interesting thing, and it's an interesting tie to ASCAP.
Rob, do you mind if I tell a little story that's kind of related to that? A friend of mine, and I'll make it as short as I can, a number of years ago, composed and recorded a piece of music for a Law and Order episode, which can be found on YouTube, actually. He composed it, he wrote it, he got paid to do it. But he's a member of one of these, I don't know if it's ASCAP or BMI, doesn't matter. But every time that episode plays as a repeat, anywhere in the world, he gets paid. He gets a check quarterly based on that one composition and performance. So there you go. It's pretty cool.
What is good luck when talent meets preparation? Is that the line?
It's cool. I usually try to show the video in my class because it's just cool.
When opportunity meets preparation. That's good luck, and that's a super. I mean, yeah, you have to be talented to be able to do that, but it's also super lucky to be chosen to, provide something like that. I wish that I could write the McDonald's jingle again. Come on.
I know, right?
Plays everywhere, all over. Okay, so going forward, we can talk a little bit here on parody as well, and if you're going to do something and kind of make it your own, it's not automatically in fair use. You want to double check the 4 factors that we just talked about, but you really want to aim for criticism or commenting upon an original work for a different effect. It may be comic, it may be ridicule, but the idea that it's transformative, and transformative is what protects that clip that I mentioned earlier on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the Twilight series. It's transformative. You've changed what the original use was, and you've created something completely different. I also mentioned here Weird Al Yankovic, because he does all these covers and makes parodies of all of the popular songs, but he still protects himself in every way, shape, and form he can. He obtains licenses and gets permission for the most part when he's going to parody a song. And Denise, you even said that when reaching out, sometimes he'll go straight to the performers.
Yeah, I believe I have read that he actually, and it's not in this book that I have, but that he actually asks, says, I want to do a parody of your tune, and that if the original author, performers, etc. say no, he doesn't do it. But I don't know where I read that, so I can't back it up with a resource, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
I had heard that as well.
Oh, you've heard it too? Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. And the other, going back to this, the other example would be like the Scary Movie series that parody, in one film, they parody pretty much everything as far as the horror films from the 80s and 90s, and they make a compilation type thing. So, again, they're all going to get permission and rights to make that movie anyhow. Because it's better to be safe than sorry, because in that case you can't spend millions of dollars on a film and then find out you're not going to get permission. You have to double check and make sure that that's all good beforehand. All right, so when you consider these 4 facts, what is fair? There isn't a guarantee on that. If your class is going to watch something, whether it's a news or a video or a scene from a play or something like that, if they're going to watch or read something for criticism and commenting purposes, you're usually okay. If you're a journalist student and you're going to videotape yourself commenting on something, usually news reporting is okay. Teaching, if we take a look at the TEACH Act, as far as the online version and digitizing what we do in the classroom, teaching is usually okay. And then scholarship and research. But another note on teaching, what happens inside the classroom, if it's limited to the classroom, is usually good to go. I can play all of a Michael Jackson tune to comment on how the structure and form go together inside the classroom, and I'm usually going to be okay inside the classroom as long as I'm not giving all of the students a copy of the Michael Jackson song and saying, take this copy home and do what you want with it. But if I'm playing it in the classroom and commenting and stopping and pausing and things like that and discussing, that's going to be okay. And now there's some other things that I can do if I'm teaching a class that has a lot of different sound files, like a survey of jazz or a survey of history or something like that. I can make a collection CD and put it in the library and have that collection CD available to the students, not to check out, but on reserve, that I can say, go to the library and listen to these X amount of songs. Or you could even say, I need to put these 5 movies or videos on reserve in the library. And that's not copyright infringement while you have the original copies, you've paid for the original copies, and you then place them in the library, so that for that limitation of in library use only, you're not publicly making available to anyone that information or that movie or that sound file. It's protected because it's inside the library and it's limited to only those students. We're going to see in the Teach Act for online purposes, those same rules are going to apply. So I mentioned the Teach Act. So adaptations for the internet, and this really came around in the late 90s and early 2000s. People are more aware of it because we just went through a pandemic and pretty much everybody had to learn how to teach online. But the adaptations were actually from a while ago. And in the next slide, we're going to look at the Teach Act and what that allows. But when we also talk about resources, I guess is really the best way to put it, resources to reach out and get legally published coursework. Cengage always comes to mind for a lot of the music courses that we use. They're an online publisher, but they're also a regular book publisher. They've already created cartridges that fit inside Blackboard that work seamlessly. So you order the cartridge, the students order their, their access code, and then that unlocks, through Blackboard, it unlocks a series of coursework that's available. So it could be a bunch of songs or excerpts for a world music class or something like that, and they're already available. So, and I should say they're already, the permission has already been granted because it's not through us, it's through Cengage in that case. Other resources, PBS Learning, if you were to look that up, and then Google for Education, if you look that up, plenty of resources as far as specifically made videos for use in the classroom and use online. And when we take a look at this next slide on the Teach Act, it's going to explain even more about that. So again, the Teach Act, as soon as the internet started being used a whole lot more for teaching, and the concept of Blackboard came around, basically there needed to be a way to convey information over, for distance learning. So that's where this came from. The important checklists. The institution needs to be a government body or an accredited nonprofit educational institution. So for me, if I wanted to teach drum lessons out of my basement, but I wanted to do it online, okay, I need to be a whole lot more careful because I'm not protected in that scenario under the Teach Act. I'm doing it for profit, and I'm not a government body or an accredited nonprofit unless I start a free school of music or something like that. But it's, the Teach Act is going to protect institutions more than individuals. The second point, educational institution must institute policies regarding copyright. So, yeah, that's self-explanatory. You need to let your students know that if you're showing them something, that it is copyrighted. It's always good to educate your students whether something is copyright protected, and let them know specifically that there's a limitation. They're allowed to view something, but they're not allowed to share something. The fourth spot here, provide notice to students that the course material. Yeah, just explained that before I read that. Oh well. And then transmission of content must be made solely for the students officially enrolled in the course. So about that, inside Blackboard, if you link to a YouTube video, you're good to go. If you upload a video into Blackboard, that's made available to your students. And in some situations, those students can then download and save that file to view it later directly from Blackboard. And if you're not aware of that, you should be aware of that. If you post one of your lectures up there and it's material that you want to be viewed only, I don't know that I would make my own video and put it in Blackboard, because they can always download it if they want to, versus using Kaltura, the video support for making your own videos. So it's something to be aware of, especially if in that lecture you're going to play an audio example or a video example or show some artwork or, show several pages of the text of a play or something like that. You just need to be aware of that. You don't want something to be available to your students only and then find out that they download it and post it to their own social media and say, hey, look what we did today in class. And now all of a sudden you produced content that is not really protected anymore because they took it and ran with it. So you just want to be aware of things like that. Kaltura is very good as far as limiting the permissions to only students and only students in the class, officially enrolled in the class. That's what works. So number 5 here on this slide, that's where Kaltura is good to go. If you were to use a YouTube page, a personal YouTube page to make videos available, they do have a manner in which you can only, if it's not a public page, if you make your YouTube page private and then only share the link to that page with your students, that's one level of protection. But even still with YouTube, if you send that link to your students, the students can share that link with somebody else, and they'll still, because the link is the link, they'll still have access to that link. So you just want to be careful with that. I think we were very fortunate to add Kaltura to the Blackboard portal when we did, to be able to protect anything that you might be doing that, if you're going to show an example that in the classroom, no problem at all, but online, maybe you're not sure of, Kaltura is your better bet.
Because it stays inside of Blackboard.
Right, and you can't right-click and download it, and you can't republish it, and that sort of thing. As far as best practices, review those 4 factors and consider them when creating lessons and projects. You can obtain the rights to post something directly from the publishers, and in some cases you can go directly to an author, especially if you know the band or you know the poet or the person who wrote the book is a friend of yours from college, and you just reach out and say, hey, I want permission to use this this part of your book for this lesson or something like that. It's not hard to find people anymore with the internet, so you can just reach out, and the worst they can say is, no, I'd rather you work directly through our publisher. And then follow any web policies established for Owens. Whatever's already in place makes sense. To just know about that, I'm going to defer to Michael. Michael's going to have a little bit of a discussion here towards the end. So I'm going to try to wrap up a couple of these slides. So, okay, use your library. Hey, Mike, you want to comment on any of these things on this slide?
Well, we're going to, at the end of the presentation, you guys are done, I'm going to take folks on a tour of the library's research, or the library guides, or library guides, I should say, will touch on a lot of these things. And so, yeah, I will definitely be showing folks where they can find these on the library homepage, because there's some great resources here. There truly are.
So that's up and coming.
Being that it's 1:45, Rob, is it okay if we defer to Mike to share some things, and then if we have time we can add some more or ask people what questions they have? I don't want to take advantage of folks' time because they're willing to hang out with us.
No, this is a great transition time. This is a good point to transition. Right. And Mike, if you're ready, go ahead. Take it away.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
I'll stop sharing here.
All right, or not. Hold on. Okay, bear with me here. All right. All right, we don't want this. Oops, I'm sorry, folks. I thought I had this nailed. Let's see. Share application screens. Like to share. Okay. Okay, come on, you bugger. My apologies. Oh wait, maybe another tab. Here we are. All righty, outstanding. So, so here the library has a collection of library guides covering a wide variety of materials. I'm going to show you one of the library guides to supplement, as I mentioned, some of the stuff that Rob and Diane are talking about. We do have a page on copyright. So basics of copyright. Again, they've touched on this. We've got some copyright basic circulars you can see, and copyright circular for educators and librarians. And Rob talked about the Teach Act. Got more information there. And then there's Creative Commons.
Where do we find that, Mike? All we see is the library opening page. Where do we go to find this?
So if you go to the library's homepage and then click on the Live Guides icon, that'll take you to the collection of library guides. As you can see, they're subject-based. Some are specific for subjects, others like copyright, citations. Again, it talks about a lot of this, what Rob and Denise talked about, movie presentations. Now, a lot of this, I mean, this is still somewhat germane to as we've been talking about, the students, because if you're going to do a project, you're pretty much under the same, I'm going to assume, Rob and Denise, correct me, you're pretty much under the same restrictions the professor is or your instructor in terms of how much you can use. But at any rate, talks about movie presentations, that's his classroom use, but
yeah, Mike,
down here we talk about, there are some information on Swank, classroom use is okay, this is more for instructors, embedding links.
Michael, we still only see the opening library page.
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
So what
maybe
happens?
It's a different window. Rob's saying maybe it's in a different window.
Yeah, that's my guess, is the window you're sharing, when you click that link, a different window opens, so you don't automatically share that. Yeah.
Are we here? Okay, here we are. Is this guy seeing this now? Is this good?
No, we still see the opening page.
Okay. How about this?
Nope.
Well, my apologies here. I thought I had this down.
Yeah, since it opens a separate window, you might have to share, go back into the sharing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Or if you share your whole screen,
No, sorry, share.
then we'll see the pop-up.
Yeah. Oops. All right, I wanted to share the entire screen, but so I am in, I'm in Google. I sometimes, maybe, I did the Chrome tab. I guess I'll be sharing tabs at this point. I wanted to share the entire screen, but apparently, wait, hold on, okay, I had to click on it. All righty. Are people seeing this?
That's the main screen again, but now I see tabs across the top. So if you...
Yeah. Well, okay, hold on. This is where you get the Twilight Zone. Theoretically, if I click on another tab, you guys should see it. Are you seeing the library homepage?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All righty, back to Live Guides down here in the corner. As I said, there's some subject-specific stuff. And we do have information on copyright, as I said, to supplement what Rob and Denise talked about. Movies for classroom use. And these are some of our resources: Swank, motion pictures, documentaries, feature films for education. And we let you know here, too, it's okay for classroom use, and the links can be embedded. More information on this, which I'll get to. We have another page for it, but I did your library, Canopy, so we'll talk more about that in a bit. And the textbooks, let's see, bear with me here. Okay, I'm actually gotten off of the where I want it to be. All right. So as I said, we do have our copyright information page. So if you guys refer back to, we're going to be adding this video. It'd be a great addition to this. Now, going back to the library's homepage under videos, you will, you'll find the Owens Talks at the library, where this is going to end up. We have streaming video at Owens Library, feature films, This is something new. It's actually through Films on Demand. It's a COVID funding issue. We've basically got feature films and foreign films that you can look at. No public performance rights here. But yeah, now there's Films on Demand, which is basically documentaries for educational use. Public performance rights here, there's no issue with that. Canopy is another resource we just got. Same thing basically with Swank. And I see what's available, currently licensed content, places to click on. Digital library, there are 2,000 videos in there. Feature films and television series, as you can say. They do have public performance rights in the details. They'll tell you whether or not it's public. I'll just show you that real quick. Whether or not it's public performance. A scary movie. Go to the details here. It'll tell you not permitted. So there is information there to help you. Again, if you have any issues, please contact us. And then there's Swank Motion Pictures. And again, there are possibilities to use it in the classroom for you. It talks about news videos and other videos. There's Jove resources. They actually have a link where you can actually embed them in your Blackboard page, which is kind of nice. So a lot of stuff here for as I said, potentially students, well, at least not public performance rights, but potentially that can be used for student projects too. Although, as I said, some of this be not quite so good, but Films on Demand possibly be used. Go back here. So that's the videos, and it talks about obviously that multimedia. You also have electronic books. Here are e-resources. Again, you can take a look at this at your leisure. I don't want to take too much time to talk about this because there's a lot, but these are all resources you can use. Again, we're not just talking about copyright issues here, but just as a student or even an instructor. Electronic resources, we're talking books, streaming videos, just a wide variety of electronic resources. And we have access to more electronic resources than we do hard copy. Pretty much the wave of the future of electronic resources, but they do certainly have their advantages, even though some people aren't that crazy about them. Even so. So again, we do have the videos that can be used for classroom use. Professors can certainly link to a movie in Swank or Canopy to have students go ahead and watch that. I will say this though, if an instructor is going to put a link, particularly in their Blackboard, don't link directly to whatever. For example, if you wanted to look at an article, don't link directly to the article or necessarily the movie, because sometimes what happens is, or frequently, it'll take the students to the company's home page, like EBSCO for articles, and the students don't have an account with them, and it's kind of confusing. Sad thing is you're trying to do a good deed from helping them out, but the best bet, put the link to the library's home page, or at least I should say to the library database page, and then just instruct the students to go down and click on whichever database you want them to use, and then they can look for the article. But best intentions, you're trying to help students, they can kind of muck things up. So as far as that goes, if you're going to link for students, that's what you want to do. As I said, again, a wide variety of resources available to you here at the library. And if you have any questions, like Rob was saying, just give us a holler and we'll try and help you out, or we will help you out.